Ken Levine. How you doing? I'm the creative director of Irrational Games, and you are watching Gameblog. Yep. Well, Elizabeth has two roles in the game. One is obviously a narrative component, and it's very important to us that the player develop a relationship with her, because she's the center of this conflict that's tearing apart the city. And you're discovering why that is, and she's discovering why that is. Something that's kind of new for a BioShock game is that we wanted to move the narrative out of people talking in your ear and talking to you from other sides of glass, and have somebody who's going through the experience with you, who doesn't know everything like you and is learning about the situation like you, and you can see some of the impact it's having on her. You saw when she uses her powers and the blood coming out of her nose, and kind of it costs her to use those powers. In terms of gameplay, she has another very important component, is that we found that we wanted the player to be able to use their sort of what you think of more as BioShock powers, gun in one hand, powers in the other hand, and have all those suite and expand upon that suite in BioShock Infinite, substantially expand upon it. And we'll talk more about that down the road. But Elizabeth lets you do things on a scale you hadn't really done before. You saw the kind of stuff in the demo with the bridge, and something you really couldn't do in a traditional BioShock game. What's really important to understand about her is she makes those opportunities available for you. You can choose to take her up on it or not. And you can like that guy in the bridge you were fighting, you could have just fought him using your own powers, using the environment, using your tools. She just gives you another option. And because of the way she's engineered, it just expands that kind of like awe-inspiring level of scale we can do things on. And as well as getting the benefit of this character you're going through this experience with. It's a combination of things. I mean, some things are scripted to some degree. But again, like, you don't have to take her up on them, so they don't necessarily follow through a particular script. But also there's things she'll do, commenting on the world, commenting on the dynamic combat situation. Maybe even like picking up, you run out of ammo, she sees some on the ground, pick it up and toss it to you. Things she can do which are dynamic as well as the things that are scripted. Same with what you say, the things you say. You're saying things to her like, you saw, "Get behind me," you say at one point. That's something that can be generated dynamically based upon, the position in the world. We learned a lot from, I think Valve taught some really good lessons with Left 4 Dead about how to bring some dynamism into AI speech and things like that, and AI actions. And we're going to incorporate those things as well, but in a very narrative, unlike Left 4 Dead, a very narrative-focused game. I think, in terms of any morality choices, that's something we'll be talking about down the road. Here's what I will say. Obviously, the game is set in a moral universe. There's a context of morality about BioShock games. They're not, and it's always a bit of it's not black and white morality. But I think we will say that we're not going to have a duplicate of a system we had in any previous BioShock games. We think that little sister, big daddy morality tale has been explored at this point pretty well, and we're not interested in repeating ourselves there. But we'll talk more about the moral elements of the game down the road. I'm interested in, if we do something, to do something that we haven't done before and that other people haven't done before. How's that for an evasive answer? No, I think, look, the demo is 10. There's two things. The demo is 10 minutes long, and we wanted mostly to show how this game is different from previous BioShock games. So, the fact that you saw a tiny bit of indoor spaces. There will be plenty of indoor spaces in this game, plenty of intimate little moments where you come across this tiny little scenario, quiet moments and studied moments. You saw a little bit of the beginning of the sense of that, with the guy in the cart and the woman with sweeping. That's an important part of a BioShock game, is sort of just discovering things on your own. I think we wanted to show also the scale of the kind of action we could do, and the vertigo and the impact of what the types of environments you had on this base. We're working with Elizabeth, the kind of things she could bring to the table action wise, but we're no way were we walking away from that kind of quiet intimacy as well, and scary quiet intimacy. Well, you see in a BioShock game, no way. This demo though was not the focus of this demo. Yeah, it's all about expanding the tool set. Like, just in combat specifically, one of the challenges I think that we were less successful on in BioShock was, that expression when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You had electrobolt and shotgun, and everything was a tight corridor with one or two enemies. So electrobolt and shotgun. Why use anything else? First challenges we gave for ourselves. We do this huge space. You can saw like your electrobolt and your shotgun's not going to do you a lot of good outdoors. And then you have a sniper rifle distance, but a guy's moving at 80 miles an hour on a skyline. That's not going to do you a lot of good. You're fighting one guy, and that's great for this type of weapon. But then what if there's 15 guys coming at you? You need crowd control. You need area of effect weapons. All those things which we had in earlier BioShock games, but we never asked you to use them, really. We never gave you a situation where it's required to use them, so you use them for novelty purposes more. And so, we really want to mix up the sort of gameplay experiences and the gameplay dynamics. In terms of new systems and things like that, I think what you're asking about as well. There's a lot of new stuff in here. We're not going to be talking about it a lot today. So the first week we're showing things, and we tend to roll things out over time. We sort of showed you last time. We showed you a demo of a Big Daddy, and then a few months later we showed you how those combat works. Down the road you'll see the Skylines. We'll have a demo of the Skylines and how those work. So we'll say that's going to feel like it's not going to feel like a movement travel experience. Well, obviously you're moving and traveling. This focus of the Skylines is a combat experience. Imagine a roller coaster stacked on top of a roller coaster, stacked on top of a roller coaster, and you can jump from roller coaster to roller coaster, and people are shooting at you and you're shooting at them. That's the experience of the Skylines, and that's something that's going to add a lot to the game. And we're going to talk about more down the road as well. There's a lot of things that BioShock tends to take on that other people don't. Like, I get asked a lot of questions about politics, for instance. And again, I think it's less a reflection on anything good or bad we do, and more a reflection on what other people aren't doing and the opportunities they're leaving open. I still think we're a young medium, and we're figuring out how to do things, and I think we just sort of, for better or for worse, we're dumb enough to sort of throw ourselves into places where other people aren't. And I think a mature romance is something you don't see a lot of in games. And I think because it's very challenging to do. And there's a lot of things you're seeing, like how do you build a connection between you and essentially what's a puppet, right? In a video game. But, I think our counterparts in animated films have demonstrated for many years that you can do that effectively. It doesn't matter if it's a line drawing or a puppet or whatever it is, you can make very effective connections between characters. And so we look at those a lot. We think about, how do you make connections between characters? And I think, we think a lot about how do you feel like you need that person? How do you feel like that person needs you? That's the first step. Anybody can do, she's hot. She's got a nice body. That's not the hard part. It's how do you build beyond that? So you feel like you had an experience where you haven't done before. Generally, people stop at she's hot. And there are even things like little things like we do, like Elizabeth, obviously, like some of her features are exaggerated, like her eyes, because you can read a lot more of what's going on in her face, especially at a distance, when you're 20 feet away from her. We don't have all the same cues in that we do in real life, where where you can incredibly subtle things. So you exaggerate certain things. But BioShock is a game that trades in a lot of exaggeration. Its visuals are quite exaggerated in general, so she fits into the world. But it's a process that we spent a lot of time thinking about, and and we're very committed to making this character have a relationship with you, and making that work. There's a lot of interdependencies, the things you're talking about, one thing's depending on another, where graphics, sort of everything you can make a beautiful scene and everything will just sort of, you drop this item in, you drop that item in, you drop that item in, it's beautiful. I mean, it's not easy, but the process is a little more straightforward. Once you get a sort of interconnecting web of interactivity, it gets very, very complicated. On BioShock 1, we had, we try to raise the bar on certainly on what we had done before interactive wise. And, you have this happening and that affects that and that affects that affects that. And that just opens up a whole skew of bugs and problems. But if you don't do that, if your development process doesn't feel like you've been through a war to some degree, then you haven't pushed yourself hard enough to make an experience that people are going to be excited and thrilled about, because they can go play somewhere else where somebody else is going to make themselves go through those challenges. And this game was really about, we came off BioShock, and it would have been very easy for us to go do something very similar again. Exactly. Oh, we'll just go make 1.5 of that. But that just wasn't the mission of the studio, and it wasn't what we wanted to do, because the best thing we got out of BioShock is that people will now trust us. People who pay our bills will trust us enough to take chances, and that's very exciting for us. It's sort of the same answer I gave back on BioShock 1, which is we don't just do things to do them. Like, we don't do multiplayer modes just to do them. We had done before, and it never worked for us. It's not a good idea creatively. It's not a good idea from a business standpoint. We experiment with things all the time. If we have something to say in this game that's non-single player, it has to be a statement as important as the rest of the game. If we have something like that, you'll see it in the game. If we don't have something like that, you won't see it in the game. We want to get the player back to this place of, when they see this game, of WTF, what am I seeing here? And that also throws up questions like, well, how is this a BioShock game? I think people with time will understand more and more how this is a BioShock game, while also understanding how it's different from previous BioShock games. And stay tuned for that. I think it's going to be very interesting, because it's, we've tried to do things a little differently than other people have done it in terms of what people expect out of a sequel. And we're really excited to show you guys more.